Thanks for joining us today. And of course, thank you so very much to all of our presenting sponsors. We really could not continue the energy, the continuity, the amazing guests and voices that we bring onto our show without these presenting sponsors. So do us a favor, reach out to them, follow them, like them, send them some digital love. And if there's any services that you think they might be able to help you with, please do check them out because they truly are amazing. As is Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I'm Jarrett Ransom, also known as the Nonprofit Nerd, CEO of the Raven Group. So today is Thursday, and every now and then, Julia and I pop on and provide a masterclass from us, by us, to you. And this is one of those really exciting days. I'm so thrilled to have you, Julia, in the hot seat. I know I've been in the hot seat several times before, and I said, you know what? I'm going to turn this around. I think it's your time. Long overdue. And this is such a fantastic conversation that we're talking about today. And you've got such a, depth and breadth of knowledge when it comes to this. Now, I want to know, we are essentially condensing a 2-hour training or workshop into, I'm going to say 25 minutes because we've got the intro and the ending. So we really have a lot to cover here. But Julia, thanks so much for joining me and for sitting in the hot seat. You're going to talk to us today really about millennials and how we can engage them in our communities, and not just that, but like into our organizations in a greater way. So let's get going.
Okay, it's really an important thing. I think that we had, when we started identifying the mills, they're born between 1980 and the year 2000. And there was a big period of time where it was like mill bashing because they were doing different things and they just had a different way of behavior. And we'll get into that a little bit. But it was just such a fascinating thing to see. And the reason why this is such a bad attitude that bleeds into a bad strategy is that there are 80 million millennials alone in this country. They've got about a $200 billion spending portfolio, and this power is only increasing.
Right.
This power is going up as they make more money, they inherit more money. So this is a powerhouse in terms of just not numbers, but economics. And if you're in a nonprofit and you're not cultivating this next gen of leadership for your boards, for your staff, and for your donors, big miss.
And yesterday's guest talked about this, right? Talked about not only global citizenry, but how do we prepare for the next generations to come? So this is a wonderful conversation to tag on to yesterday's episode. And looking at this wealth, and I too want to acknowledge many of this demographic population, they are inheriting and they are, really managing a large portfolio of assets, but they're also earning it on their own. And they're doing this through some very non-traditional ways. Were previously non-traditional, right? Come to be more and more not only society, approved and endorsed, but just kind of the thing. That's what's happening. So they're adding to what they already have.
That's the thing, Jarrett. I mean, they are controlling a lot of wealth that they are inheriting. And there's fewer, one of the interesting things in this demographic is that they have fewer siblings, right?
Yes.
So like with my generation, I was born in 1961 and I had, I was from a family of 3 kids, right? Well, we at that time were considered a small family. Most of my friends had larger families, right? Well, now it is not uncommon to find, single, as they call single sibs, only one child in a family. So think about the concentration of wealth. It's even going down to fewer people, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
It is interesting. And I believe that I heard a statistic that our population growth, and I'm probably not saying this right, but actually decreased last year, meaning, and again, I'm not saying this right, but meaning there were less births last year in our society, our nation, and therefore decreasing our population from the birth rate alone. I love single siblings, right? Like my mom was an only child. My son is an only child. I say one and done, because when you do it right the first time, who needs to try again? But then there's also many, many, many professionals that do not desire being a parent, right? And that is advantageous and just as good as anything. And so I just want to bring a voice to that as well. I have many friends that do not desire being a parent, and I just think that's something that we should equally honor. And you're right, Julia. So there are fewer like generational considerations that these millennials, if you will, are making.
It's huge. And I think that that's because what's interesting about it for the nonprofits is that before, when you would have this transition of wealth, which is normal, you would have siblings that would have to, report back to their family unit and say, okay, what are we going to do with this inheritance? Well, now you don't have that. You are going to be having more and more. I mean, you do have it, obviously, but you're going to have more and more opportunities where you are sitting across the table or across the camera with the one decision maker.
That's
So
right.
that he doesn't have to say, okay, I have to get to, my sisters, my brothers, and they live on the East Coast and I live on the West Coast, or, all this stuff. It'll be like, okay, yeah, let's go. We're going to do it or we're not. And so it changes the way we look at how we can communicate and get these decisions made with donors. It's really an interesting thing. Another thing to think about is that this is the highest educated demographic in the history of our country. We've never had more people educated, and we actually have more women educated coming out of higher institutions than we have men, which is really a whole nother topic of conversation. But this is the kicker. We also have the highest level of debt, of student debt, that has ever been racked up. And so this is one of those things that can stop a potential donor when they know when that debt's going to be paid off. How do they mitigate making an investment in something when they still have a heavy level of debt? And that's another big impactor that we're seeing from the millennials. Go ahead.
I think, and I want to add to that, because what I have seen, and I'm curious how you speak to this, Julia, particularly with this demographic, is millennials are younger demographics, right? Younger than me for sure. There's so many statistics and studies that show they don't want to be tied down, right? So like they're not purchasing homes, they're not doing these things. So they really do want to pay off their debt so they don't feel tied to a certain, commitment there. So for me, I remember going to college, taking out a loan and thinking, this is how you do it. This is normal. And I will just have a debt and student loan debt for the rest of my life until it's paid off, and I will just chip away at it. But these individuals are really looking to chip away in bigger chunks, right? So that they don't have that commitment and that tie in to the debt.
Right. And so what is going to be something that we're seeing more and more are corporations that will do kind of like scholarshiping in of maybe absorbing some of that debt in like a signing bonus, because we also have a diminished workforce. With this birth dearth comes fewer people in the pipeline, right, to hire. And so that's going to be like one of the next big waves, is we don't have enough talent to fill the jobs that we have. But aside from that, we will have more and more HR teams come to the marketplace saying, yeah, we'll support you if you want to go get an MBA, or if you want to, move through different phases of education in almost like a matching piece or a rebate, because this is a big issue, looking at this debt and understanding if you could go get a job with ABC company and they're going to have some sort of student loan mitigation, it's going to be a lot more popular. So
this is something that this demographic is looking at. And I think you're going to discuss that later, is like, what are the benefits, even the societal, the community, the involvement, the do-good benefits that come with engagement of the service?
It's really true. And I think it's one of those things that we need to really acknowledge, and that this is a community that, yeah, they're completely social media oriented. They've had this digital communication, but this has bled over into what they're doing and what they're sharing. And absolutely, they want to be proud of the company that they work with, or their spouse works with, even their extended family. And they know what's going on with those companies. And so part and parcel to that is having that I call it the witness, but a social media witness, where they're like, my company, we just did this community action. We are donating this. We just took a day out of our month and we all put our resources towards helping this organization. There's a lot of these things going on, and that if you can't, as an organization, as a nonprofit, understand how to engage in this, you're missing the boat. You're missing the boat. And we see this a lot with nonprofits working with for-profit HR departments, and HR departments saying, how do we create a benefit for our employees by doing something that's socially strong, socially good, and that can be shared socially, right? It's very interesting. Never had that before in our sector.
What I saw a lot of recently, Julia, with Earth Day that was recently celebrated this month, was a lot of organizations, including our sponsor, Bloomerang, that took out the entire team, it looked like, at least from social media, into their community to do good, to be of service in their community. And that might be one way, if I'm correct, if I'm understanding you properly, Julia, of opportunities and benefits of engagement at a higher degree, higher level for the employees. So again, the millennial population demographic really looking to be involved in their community and looking to have those opportunities to be involved from their companies in which they're working.
Right. So the next big day, I mean, you'll see things like around major American holidays, of course, but the next big volunteer day is the Day of Service, which is now officially September 11th. And there is a big, big push in corporate America to say, okay, we are not going to work in our offices or on our business that day. We're going to give it to our communities in a day of service. And maybe you're an accounting firm. Okay, so you're going to go in and help, you're going to send all your accountants out and bookkeepers, and you're going to find nonprofits to help with for that day. Or, there are creative ways to do it that can also strengthen the skill sets with which your business serves, right? Or it can just be something completely random. Right. But this is really goes back to employee satisfaction. And that's something that millennials really look for. They are not staying at their jobs as a penance, thinking, oh, well, if I leave, I'll be ruined. They don't have a problem giving 2 weeks notice, because remember, they are part of a demographic where there are too many positions open and not enough bodies to fill these positions for educated workers, right? And so they can get a new job. And they also know the gig economy. So they know that they can support themselves, bartending or driving an Uber or whatever for a short period of time. They're not afraid of that. Yeah. It's very interesting.
So I was interested yesterday. I found this just so intriguing. A connection of mine from the Southeast had posted, that she just received her 25-year employment award, right? And I thought, fascinating. I do not know the last time I saw a post mentioning that, right? I do not remember the last time I saw someone, really celebrating that 25 years of service to one employer. And that to me was, it was awe-inspiring, right? I mean, the commitment, the dedication, all of the good things that goes into it. And then also that is so rare, to hear, because it used to be, I've got to get that watch that I get at this point, or I've got to get, this nice plaque or whatever that thing was to really, demonstrate the company's appreciation for your
Right.
longtime service.
Right. And it's funny, Jared, you'd mentioned that. I was on a panel probably about 2 or 3 years ago with a bunch of nonprofit leaders, and we were talking about the demographics of millennials versus different generations, and specifically about how they relate to the nonprofit sector. And one of the speakers was an HR professional, and they said, back in the day, I would look at a resume and I'd be like, oh, wow, they're a job jumper, they're not stable. And she said, now we look at resumes and we see if people haven't moved, we think of them as intransigent. They're like, oh, they're not going to play well with others because they have a specific way and they are not going to be able to be nimble. It was fascinating. And so this is how this demographic is shifting our mindsets, from how we work with them to how they work with us. So let's talk about this thing that you briefly mentioned, and that is this massive, massive transference of wealth that's going on right now, right here, right today. Some people estimate that it is as much as 90 trillion with a T, $90 trillion in assets that are flowing into the millennials.
I don't even know what that looks like, by the way. I mean, how many zeros are in a T?
I know. Too many. That's why it's a T. And so this, I'll be here all week. This is why it's so hard for most of us to understand, because the people passing on their wealth don't even understand it. The people receiving the wealth can't grasp it. I mean, you can see our countries, we've been wrestling with inheritance laws, taxation, all of these things. And that is because of this. It's a 30-year window, according to demographers, and we are into it at about 10 years. So we are really seeing this ramp up. And so your nonprofit needs to understand that this is going on now. It's not a forward-thinking issue. It is an actual occurrence that's only going to get picked up and emboldened. We hear this silver tsunami, the aging of America and the transference of wealth. That's what we mean by that. And it's really significant. Now, it's not all going to be cash. It's going to be, as I like to call it, velvet paintings of Elvis. It's going to be second homes. It's going to be boats. It's going to be stocks and bonds.
Assets of all kinds.
All kinds. And so you have to understand how your organization can work with that.
You think there'll be some Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's going to be really interesting. One of the big things that we're seeing too is IP, intellectual property. And my favorite IP story is Irving Berlin, White Christmas. If I'm not mistaken, the intellectual properties to that has been given to the Boy Scouts of America.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, which was done in what, the 30s?
Yeah.
Late 30s. So, I mean, these are things that will happen. In fact, we had a major foundation, the Leichtag Foundation from San Diego, if you remember, and the Leichtags had invented, Dr. Leichtag had invented some sort of medical device. And the royalties from, and he had invented, I think, several, but from one particular, all the royalties from that went to fund this foundation that supports Jewish causes in San Diego County. That was just one of his assets.
So how do we prepare, Julia, for this transference of wealth as a nonprofit entity, organization? I'm thinking, with my nonprofit nerd glasses on and my fundraising hat, gift acceptance policies, right? How do we prepare for this?
Absolutely. So we need to have a shift in this, because millennial donors don't look at charity as much as they look at investment. So they don't tag something to a moral issue, like poverty is wrong. Okay. Millennials are going to be like, poverty, yeah, it's wrong, but it has a negative impact on our other social systems. You know, it has negative impacts on our environment, on our economics, all of these things. And so it tags back to the data-driven piece versus the emotion. And that's why, to your point, Jarrett, we do need to have very, very structured and thoughtful gift policies, understanding how those are tagged to our investment policies, because guess what? As our nonprofits grow and we have investment portfolios or we're managing endowment, millennial donors are going to come back and say, wow, you know what? You shouldn't be involved in investing in fossil fuels. You know what? You shouldn't be investing in war-torn nations. You know, it's going to be those questions that come up, where before their other donors would never get involved in that. They would never even think to ask those questions.
So how do you recommend an organization then really embracing this transference of wealth, embracing the millennial demographic, and really all demographics, but today we're talking specifically in this masterclass about the impact of the millennial demographic? How would you recommend organizations embrace and I want to say elicit, if that's the right word,
Cultivate.
Cultivate, but you know, their thoughts for their particular organization.
Right. So a couple things. You need to look at your CRM and figure out where that millennial flow is, right? And you need to be looking at your donors, your current donors who might have millennial, you know, that next millennial generation that's coming behind them. And what are you doing to cultivate them so that you can steward in that next generation? You also need to be looking about what millennial staff you have and what millennial board members you have. And if you have a young professionals board, yay team. If you don't, you need to be looking at that. You need to be looking at leadership councils, everything from chambers of commerce to the Greek system, and how you can engage those demographics into your organization, whether that be tours, events, you know, lunch and learns, whatever, in real life or virtual. But bringing these people and speaking their language, they're going to be really interested in data sets. They're going to be really interested in solutions, not just feel good charity. They don't even use the word charity. The investment aspect in social concerns. That's where it's at.
And I hear social profit used a lot by these,
more and more.
These individuals, which I love. And I've started to change my vernacular. You know, I used to say tax exempt status, or, you know, that it's not a nonprofit. We are here to build a profit. We are here to make a profit, to help provide a solution to our community. But you will hear in certain demographics the words social profit being used instead.
Right. Absolutely. You know, and we don't have much time left. And again, when I do this work, a lot of times I will spend between 2 and 4 hours on this topic alone. And so it's a lot jam-packed into a short period of time. And we have more free courses on the American Nonprofit Academy site that you can get into. But you mentioned something in that you asked the question, you know, how do we engage this next level? And it's really important to know their interests. Social justice and DEI issues are at the forefront. And so how you engage them in these topics are really important. They're very, very interested in the natural world and climate change. They're very pro engagement on everything from recycling and packaging to understanding that that it's super cool to buy clothing from thrift stores or high-end resale shops. I mean, from those two extremes. And then they're also big into education. They understand, because of their journey, educational issues are important, and women and children's education around the world, not just in the US. Really, really a hot button. And then last but not least, work-life balance. And so we're seeing more and more events that are organizations that are moving away from like the black tie gala concept, virtual or IRL, and doing things that involve walks, like maybe with kids or their pet parents or their parents or grandparents, multi-generational things.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so which is healthy. I think it's a really great thing. So, where earlier demographics might not see that as a win, this demographic does.
Absolutely. Well, I know you have so much more to go through. You did reference the American Nonprofit Academy website, so there's going to be more information there for all of you to go and dive deeper into this conversation. Julia, I'm sure we are going to receive questions. I can already see our ask and answered, not tomorrow, but a future one, really filling up with some, questions coming about from today's masterclass. But I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like if you are not engaging in this demographic, if you are not embracing this demographic, you're missing out. And that's what I heard you say, at least. My words, but you're
I think we started off saying that, Jarrett, and it's happening now. This is not a forward thinking thing. When I first started talking about this, 10 years ago, it was probably people were like, that's kind of like pie in the sky. I don't know. And then I just started seeing more and more people coming back to the topic, and it was in a negative way. They're like, damn, I hate these millennials. They're the worst workers. Or, they were just like millennial bashing. And it was like, wow, I'm seeing the big picture.
I'm so glad you said that. I just sat in on a scholarship review committee in which it was a multi-generational review panel. And I would hear from the older individuals that, oh, well, this person jumped around from their volunteerism. They didn't stay at one particular place. And the younger demographic said, I see that as a benefit. I see that, yes. And they said, I see it as a benefit that this student, this scholar was, interested in learning. They wanted to pique their curiosity. They wanted to feed their curiosity. I see it as a benefit for many ways. And for that reason, I chose not to see it negatively, rather in a positive. And I witnessed in conversation another individual changing her vote because of the younger individual bringing that to their attention.
That is awesome.
And I private messaged this person and I said, way to use your voice. That was powerful.
I love it, Jarrett. That's, that's great. And I think that that's the perfect way to end this, because it is just such a shift in mindset.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Really cool. So we just got a message that came in. Lisa writes, you're so on point. I'm sharing the Nonprofit Academy info with coworkers and others in my field. Rock on, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm a mother of a millennial. I have two nieces that are millennials, and then I have Gen Zs. And it's fascinating to see these. And then I'm privileged to have a mom who's like super duper fabulous. And so we have these different generational shifts that we can see. And this is a tipping point, I believe, a fundamental tipping point in the nonprofit sector. So we've got to be looking at this and honoring it. Okay, so hey, I'm Julia Patrick. I've been joined by the nonprofit nerd herself, Jarrett Ransom. Another great, if I do say so myself.
Yeah. Thanks to our sponsors. We really appreciate you. There are occasions when Julia and I say, we would love to nerd out with you on this topic. We would love to stand on our soapbox and share our information with you. And thanks to our presenting sponsors for allowing us to do this on occasion. Tomorrow, we'll be back with another Friday Asked and Answered. So if you have any questions about today's conversation in particular, there are 4 ways how you can send that to us, but do send it over to us. We can't get it in tomorrow because it's already packed to the brim, but we will certainly get it to you or get that in at a future date.
Absolutely. And, Jarrett, thank you for letting me talk about one of my favorite subjects. I so appreciate you letting me do this masterclass. It's been a lot of fun. And as we like to end every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we want to remind and encourage you to stay well so you can do well.